This week on Quadriga, Hong Kong protests, challenge for China? Hong Kong has seen mass protests on a scale that pose the biggest threat to Beijing's authority since it took over from the former British colony in 1997. The protesters want the government to roll back on plans to tighten election laws that would see candidates screened before standing for office. Hong Kong's chief executive chun-ying says his government won't back down. For Beijing, the question is whether the protests will spread to the mainland. Your host this week, Ali Aslan.
Hello and welcome to Quadriga. This year marks the 25th anniversary of the riots in Tiananmen Square. And now, 25 years later, the Chinese government has a new challenge to deal with as the Hong Kong pro-democracy movement is growing by day. The question is, who are behind these protests? Why did they start? And perhaps more importantly, will the protests in Hong Kong spill over to mainland China? That is what we're going to talk about on today's show, together with three individuals, all who've been following the story very closely. Welcome to Ming, who is a Germany-based freelance journalist. Originally from Beijing, he has reported extensively on Chinese politics for German television, radio, and various newspapers. Sven Hansen is an editor on the Asia desk of the German newspaper Die Taz. He has reported from Hong Kong and travels frequently in Asia. And Günther Knabe, who is Deutsche Welle's former diplomatic correspondent for Asia and the Islamic world. Throughout his career, he has reported extensively on Asia. Ming, for us in Europe or perhaps other part of the world, these protests in Hong Kong might come as a surprise. A lot of the questions are steering towards the direction, where did this come from? And why are the people protesting now? When in fact, this was pretty much in the making for some time, isn't it?
I think the very movement related to the election law was sparked 2 years ago by a very small group of intellectuals and by hardcore pro-democracy circles in Hong Kong. It has not been taken seriously by the authority, neither in Hong Kong nor in Beijing. At that time, people just laughed at these people, ridiculous. That this very tiny group of the intellectual could conduct any connections spreading out over such huge groups of the population in Hong Kong.
Let's see what's at heart here for this discussion. The protesters want to choose their own chief executive in the 2017 election. The Chinese government says you will be able to hold direct elections, but only for the pre-selected candidates. Mm-hmm. And that is at the heart, no? That is at the heart of the movement right now in Hong Kong?
This is one of the hard political demands. The other part is they roll back the practice until now. Until now, a quarter of the candidates could be directly determined by the voters. And if the Beijing authorities say, okay, for the election 2017, it won't be any candidate directly to be determined by the voters. It means, at least from the point of the view of these intellectuals, it will mean a setback. And I think this is the very crucial point, that they not only demand improvement of election conditions, they just demand by upholding the practice until now. Then they will go over to talk about how to widen the fundament of the democratic election. And this point is usually forgotten by the discussion right now.
Sven Hansen, who is behind these protests? We're hearing about the Occupy Central movement. We hear a lot of students are on the streets in Hong Kong to have their voices heard. Who's behind it?
Yeah, I mean, the two groups you mentioned, of course, and then you have an older democracy movement who is in strong support and, of course, strongly participating. And I think that the basis for this is a widespread, a widespread feeling of discomfort, that the city is ruled in a way not in favor of ordinary people, and also not in favor of, let's say, educated people. Their chances for a higher income or for jobs is going down, and there's much more competition with young people from China and with the rich people from China who come over to Hong Kong, who buy apartments, and all the prices are rising. Hong Kong is one of the most expensive cities in the world. So the competition has got much stronger, and the ordinary Hong Kong people have no say in this. The Beijing government only listens to the rich business people, and the ordinary people have no voice in it. So that's, I think, behind this, the groups giving the spark. This is the reason behind it, and this has contributed to the fact that you now have so many people. These groups starting it have been relatively small.
You were a correspondent in Hong Kong in 1997 when it was still a British colony being handed over to China. Back then, China, of course, proclaimed famously the one country, two systems rule. Do you think that's evaporating a little bit, whereas Hong Kong is enjoying a much higher degree of autonomy than mainland China? Are we seeing the beginning of the end here? Of that autonomy?
No, I mean, I think the things have shifted in Hong Kong. I mean, I would say the quality of governance has gone down, more corruption, and the people have no possibility to vote out representatives or people in government. So that's why the discomfort is rising. And of course, one country, two systems, you can always argue where is the one country, to what point does the one country go, and where do the two systems start. So there's a shift, or has always been a discussion about it. And of course, the people now demonstrating want to see the borders between the country and the system. They want to shift it in a different direction, and of course Beijing has other interests and wants to get more and more control over Hong Kong. And this is not what the people want, or the demonstrators want. Yeah.
Yutak Nabe, China's insistence on having the candidates for the chief executive office pre-selected, some people say that is renegating on a promise that China made to Hong Kong, giving it much greater liberty and autonomy. Is China backtracking on a previous promise here?
Of course. Yeah, of course it is. One should think of the common declaration by United Kingdom and China, which was deposited at United Nations in '97 when Hong Kong was given back to China. And there all these things were written down and laid down. And the Chinese government now retreats from that, and slowly, step by step, is my impression, Hong Kong, since years, is changing more and more in political system and the social situation towards a People's Republic, China or Hong Kong. And a young lady yesterday said in Hong Kong on the streets when she was asked by a reporter, why did she come here? She was not a student, a saleswoman. She said, tears in her eyes, I came here because I don't want to lose my Hong Kong. And this is what Sven just said. The Hong Kong formerly, under British colonial rule, was a completely different one. But one should also not forget that the British, when they were colonial emperor, not emperors, but had their colony in Hong Kong, they did not provide democracy, but they more or less administrated on a very colonial style Hong Kong. And shortly before '97, handing over Hong Kong back to the Chinese, then they introduced in these common declarations the demands Hong Kong should be a democratic society and so on. So there's a little bit hypocrisy also in it.
Ximeng, how do you interpret China's stance here? How do you interpret China's perhaps tougher stance on Hong Kong than we've previously seen so far?
I think we have to differ two ongoings. The one is the economic one. Since the handover of Hong Kong to China, It is a long procedure started by converging two parts of China. The one part is Hong Kong, the other part is South China. And in economic terms, this converting procedure was a story of success. We just observe the development in South China, in the 5 richest provinces in South China, how the lifestyle has changed. It has been changing until now towards Hong Kong lifestyle, towards the pattern Hong Kong people used to think in. This is the one procedure. The other one is a political one. The political one is to gain in the control against the same lifestyle, not only in Hong Kong, but also in South China. Since 2 years, we get nearly every day some reports about detaining reporters, controlling much toughly the liberal media seated in South China, not in Hong Kong. And I think these two processes clashed. Right now in Hong Kong, that's what we can see. But much more in South China, the rest of the Western world seems to forget. And I think this is the very dimension why Hong Kong becomes so an event that scares Beijing that much, because of the economic procedures succeeding much more, whereas the political process turned back. The same procedures happening in terms of the economy, in terms of the changing of the lifestyles, in terms of the education, and the public discussions. And I think this standing point in Beijing is also a sign of power struggle within China. A part of the leadership has favored a liberal approach, not only because of the Hong Kong, but also because of the South China. And they are now losing more and more influence, whereas the hardliner is gaining their impact upon all the things happening in China and in Hong Kong. This is the context that I see the event in Hong Kong.
Sven Hansen, how surprised is the Chinese leadership by these protests in Hong Kong?
Yeah, I think they are surprised in the sense that they have not expected that many people coming out. But I mean, it's not yet over, so maybe in the end they will get it the way they want it. That's so. But I think there's a miscalculation, and I think they listen to the wrong people. They only listen to the tycoons and the rich business people. They have no feeling for Hong Kong, I would say. And also Hong Kong is changing, it's developing, it's evolving. So I mean, in the past we had all the picture that, oh, that's just an economic city. People are not interested in politics and the like. And the interesting thing is, now you have a new generation demonstrating, people who were socialized under Chinese control over Hong Kong. Not, I mean, the people now on the streets, 17 years old or 18 years old, they have no vivid memory of British rule. So they are now only have their experience with Beijing, and it must be very frustrating for Beijing to see that they cannot win over these people. But it's just the opposite. So I think China has miscalculated. They might win. Beijing might win in the long or in the medium term, but there is a lot of miscalculation, and yeah, it has to be handled very carefully.
It indeed has to be handled very carefully, Günther Knabe. And Beijing is saying they have confidence in Hong Kong local authorities to deal with these protests. But there's a big if, of course. What if Hong Kong local authorities cannot deal with the protests as Beijing wishes? What would you foresee China to do? Even send in the army?
That would be the very, very last resort for Beijing government. I think they will do everything to avoid just that. Officially, they announced that we leave that affair to be handled by the Hong Kong authorities. We won't meddle, we won't help, we won't do anything. Yeah, so they are playing, of course. No? They are telling the public, look, this is Hong Kong affair, and the Hong Kong authorities are very well prepared and very well experienced people, and they will be able to handle it by themselves. What Sven Hansen said that the authorities were more or less, and you were asking how did they prepare, were they surprised? What I think was amazing, at least for me, was that there were reports that Hong Kong police was preparing and kind of training, counterbalancing or countering these demonstrations since months. Therefore, it's even more surprising that they were taken aback. What happened out of sudden? So back to the question: what will Beijing government do? First of all, now again to the public, they say Hong Kong will be able to do it by themselves. But of course, they have got their people. And I'm sure that there are many people in plain clothes among the demonstrators, and they have got a network built up of informants and secret police and so on. So Beijing knows very, very well what is going on in Hong Kong. If the thing would escalate, they would try to get time, to win time. I think Beijing government is now trying to show they are patient, and they will leave it to the Hong Kong people. But the strong warning was, on the other hand, if there is a certain red line not respected by the demonstrators, then they are ready to do something. Not saying what they will do, but I'm sure that they would not, I repeat, they will not go in with military or with heavy force. They will avoid that, because that would be big, big, big damage to the Beijing government.
Xi, China has insisted that this is an internal affair, and they're saying, basically a message to the United States and other countries: stay out of this. This is internal Chinese affair. We'll handle it. Is it an internal affair?
No, it is not. You know, it is no longer the issues between China and Hong Kong itself. There is an increasing part of Chinese inhabitants moving to Hong Kong. The rich parents sent their children to the universities in Hong Kong, and while the universities in Hong Kong to Canada and the United States. And I think there is another development we should put attention to. That is the fleeing of the capital from Hong Kong and through Hong Kong. And all these procedures have got international dimension since years, not since months, not since days. And the other things is China's government and China's state-owned banks are operating so strongly from Hong Kong, in Hong Kong and from Hong Kong. The headquarters of the Bank of China has moved from mainland to Hong Kong in order to get more international dimensions for their own business practice. And the Hong Kong stock market was so highly standard that even Alibaba fails to get application approved. And in the end, it was the New York Stock Exchange who accepted the Alibaba notations. And I think by so many signs, the very clear signs of the international dimension that Hong Kong just now showing, it won't be an issue only between China and Hong Kong, and even less within China. And I think the emphasizing from the side of the Beijing authority that any other country should send outside of the Hong Kong, it can only mean that the political symbolic demonstration should not be treated or regarded as intervention within the Chinese political sovereignty. But in no other item, Hong Kong could be regarded as only Hong Kong or only a part of China.
Indeed, that's a very good point that Xi is making, because Hong Kong is indeed not just another city. It is a very important, if not the most important financial hub in the Far East. And of course, what happens in Hong Kong right now is being watched very closely in the countries, not just in the region, but beyond as well. Let's have a quick look.
Hong Kong is a financial hub in the Far East, and this may be a factor in how Beijing deals with the protests. China has used Hong Kong to experiment with financial liberalization. In contrast to mainland China, the rules that govern trading of the yuan are more lax in Hong Kong. Foreign investors will keep an eye on how China handles the civil unrest in the former colony. That could discourage them from investing there. That, in turn, could damage China's interactions with the global financial system. China would be a less attractive place to trade, and its overall economy could be harmed.
Well, Sven, we just saw the importance of Hong Kong. And of course, the importance is also being noted by the business leaders within Hong Kong, who favor more than anything stability.
Yes.
Are they in favor of the pro-democracy movement right now?
No, it's more the other side. I mean, if they say something, it's usually in favor of Beijing. Now they have been relatively quiet at the current protest. A few weeks back we had seen big advertisements in the newspapers by 4 big accounting companies. I think that backfired, but of course it's debatable. And I now expect a kind of economic conflict or economic strategy. If we think that the Chinese government and the Beijing government will play a waiting game, then the struggle will be about the economic effects and about the population losing patience and of course the demonstrators losing steam. And now it's starting with the tourism sector. I mean, Beijing already announced that 2 groups are not to come. Still, you can individually go, but the tourism sector is important in the sense that it employs a lot of people. So many people in Hong Kong will be employed. I mean, the GDP is not that big. The proportion of GDP of tourism is not that big, but it employs a lot of people. And so there will be a very strong economic impact by these protests. And
so would you
the pressure would grow on the demonstrators to stop it, to stop also the disruption of everyday life, which of course is not easy to handle for many people, of course. And of course for the demonstrators, I mean, to camp out on the streets for many weeks in 30 degrees and thunderstorms is not a pleasure. So I think that's the strategy. And the strategy has a precedent. We had already an Occupy movement in Hong Kong, which in the end was just camping below the ground floor of the Hong Kong-Shanghai Bank, and they stayed there for over a year. I mean, they stayed there much longer in Hong Kong than in New York or in Frankfurt or any other place, and in the end they just more or less disappeared. So I expect such a scenario at the moment.
So the protest could even backfire if Hong Kong's role as a financial hub is being endangered.
Yeah, I mean, this way there can be made pressure on the demonstrators through the, let's say, rising unemployment, through frustration or from the people who are feeling the disruptions of their everyday life and who are feeling a shortfall in their income.
And generally speaking, Günther Knabe, how sympathetic are Hong Kong residents to these democracy movements? Would it be fair to say that not all Hong Kong residents are in favor of those pro-democracy movements, Fran?
I don't know of any polls to give figures, but I would say it the other way around. I think it's not the majority. You're right now in favor of the demonstrators. Look at the pictures. They are mainly young people, as Van Hansen mentioned already. And I say if economic situation is worsening, and that will worsen if it goes on that way, then the parents of those demonstrating students who have, after all, to pay the bills for them to study, will call them back and say, boy or girl, it's enough now, come back home. And they will obey their parents. That will be also an aspect one should not forget. This is still a authority-led society, and parents have the authority to say, and now come back. So they, right now, they are more or less free to demonstrate. But if it gets very serious, they won't hold out for a long time.
Chun-ying, of course, China has no interest in the news of these movements, pro-democracy movements, Hong Kong, to reach mainland China. We've heard of media censorship. How much of this is being noted? I mean, at the end of the day, this is the 21st century. There's only so much you can censor, isn't it?
No. I think only one figure to be announced. There are 7 million Chinese who still have a permit to go to Hong Kong every time. There's so many relatives of these 7 million Chinese with this permit. And there are so many parents sending their children to Hong Kong for study, for business doing, for just shopping. They just phone each other every day. They chat with each other. There is WeChat, this new mobile phone application. And I think there is no use of the political censorship, only within the traditional internet and within the media. I think the citizen in China knows quite a lot what is now going on in Hong Kong. They are not allowed to discuss in public about these issues, but they know. I think they know quite well. This is not the point. The point is for the Chinese authority in Beijing to uphold the impression we keep the control over everything. If they fail in doing so, they just encouraging everyone in China to follow the example of the young people in Hong Kong. Not only in Hong Kong, we remember this so-called Jasmine revolution in the Arabic world, with that reason for increasing fears by the Chinese authority. Why? Because of this quite free flow of the information, because of quite a part of the Chinese citizens were prepared because of their own disappointment, frustration, and so on. Hong Kong is so near to China, and even the Chinese people say, you are apart from us. If you are Chinese and you may do this, why shouldn't I have the same right to follow you? Now, I think this is a very crucial point to the authority. They have to strengthen the impression we could keep the control in any case. And I think quite the same how the outcome of the demonstration might be in Hong Kong. So many Chinese know this is a very tough time in China, in Hong Kong, in every event which has something to do with China. And they will keep to look at the situation. How long could this phase going on?
Indeed, that is the question. How long can it go on? And I think it's safe to assume that the people in Xinjiang and Tibet are watching this very closely, how this unfolds, Sven Hansen. How likely is a spillover effect to mainland China?
I don't see it in an immediate term. I see it on a medium or long term. So that depends on the outcome. I think Hong Kong and Xinjiang and Tibet are totally different issues. I also would say, as Chen-ying says, that the people in China, they watch it, they more or less know what's going on, but though I would doubt they know the details. And also I would say that the reputation of the Hong Kongers in China at least is mixed. I mean, from many point of view, they are seen as privileged. They have a lot of privileges, and now they are even demanding more. So, and they are much better off, or they used to be much better off. So I think there are limited sympathies for Hong Kong people. I mean, not every ordinary Chinese has a lot of sympathies with Hong Kong people. On the other hand, you also see that there's a kind of looking down from the Hong Kongers on the mainlanders. You also had many events showing this in the last couple of years. So I think that's not such an easy relationship. So I think that the Chinese think about their own struggle, and of course they will analyze how does the leadership behave towards Hong Kong. And the Hong Kongers, in the first place, of course, say we struggle for our city, and that's also what they do. I mean, of course, they also would like to see China democratized because that makes it easier for Hong Kong. But of course, in the first place, they struggle for Hong Kong. And I think Tibet and Xinjiang are very, very different situations. I think what is very good now for Hong Kong is that it's really absolutely peaceful. And I would also say that any violence would just play into the hands of Beijing. So, and you see, I think it's the most orderly demonstrations in the world you ever have seen is now taking place. Of course, you don't know whether it will be like that, whether there will be agent provocateur, or whether people just lose their mind. You don't know. But anyway, that's very important. And Xinjiang is totally different, and also Tibet is very different.
Günter Knabe, you said sending in the forces would be the absolute last resort that China would do. What's the likely scenario here? Is this protest really going to have a lasting impact, or will this be an anecdote? Do you think this will fizzle out as quickly as it came, at least in the media headlines, or will this really have a lasting impact here?
First part of your question, it will not fizzle out very quickly, but I suppose it will fizzle out. This is the game Beijing is playing, time game, gaining time, and then the patience with the parents, as I mentioned, and the economists will run out, and that will put pressure on the demonstrators. But the other question, or other part of the question is, will it be just a short episode? No, I think this will be deeply ingrained in the, so to say, political memory, not only the people of Hong Kong, but worldwide anyway, but also to foreign extent, to larger extent, among the Chinese people. I wouldn't say that all the Chinese are that well informed about it, but the intellectuals and well educated they are, but not the broad masses of the Chinese. And indeed, Chinese government is very, very eager to keep pictures of Hong Kong street demonstration from the eyes of the Chinese population, because that fear that it might sweep over into China is deeply ingrained in the government people. So, to put it short, it will probably fizzle out slowly, but it will deeply be ingrained in the history or memory, political memory of all Chinese. And whenever another, let's say, occasion or situation comes up again, they will say, look, we did that at that time. What did we wrong? What did we well? And so this in
2017 would be the next. I mean, when the new chief executive would be elected by this small committee, I mean, then of course the disenchanted population has a good reason to demonstrate again. So it will come up again and again and again. Yeah. So, and yeah.
And this is, people are protesting an election that is taking place 3 years from now. Ximing, that might strike some people odd. That a protest will take place for procedure for an election that will take place 3 years from now. It's a long time.
I don't think we should narrow our sight, our view only upon these ongoing demonstrations. There is another issue much more important for the Chinese authority, that is the economy growth. The economic growth is now slowing down in China, and Hong Kong as hub will remain in its role as a very important part, as a signal generator for further developments in economic terms. If Hong Kong could not stay stable, quite the same in which manner, it will remain a very critical point for the general development of the Chinese economy. And we should not forget that this economic growth is the only legitimation for the power of the leadership in Beijing. And they have to pay quite a lot of attention that this economic growth should not be, for long run, threatened by any instability in Hong Kong or in other parts of China. And this is my point of view, that Beijing will not only wait and watch how the development in Hong Kong will go on, just wait that every democracy movement lose their impact. They have to speed up the control by upholding the trust of the majority of the people. This is a contradiction they can't handle with. They can't tighten up on the one side the control and strengthen the trust of the people in the same system. Either they lose the control and boost the trust. That is what they have been doing since the 3 decades of the reform, or they tighten the control and losing the trust. And the Hong Kong movement now, in these days, shows once again that both at the same time, that is the game Beijing won't win at any time.
So it's a lose-lose situation then, Sven Hansen, for China, is it? Damned if you do, damned if you don't?
No, not on the short term. I mean, on the one hand, I think the Beijing leadership is in a relatively, how to say, luxury position, as they can hide behind the Hong Kong government. So that is, I mean, the Hong Kong chief executive, I mean, he is now being used to take the blame and somehow try to make some order, and then later you can drop him and put all the blame on him. So Beijing is not, I mean, is out of the fire, to a certain extent out of the fire. And also you have the same with the Hong Kong police. So if you use force, you can say, okay, the Hong Kong police was the one doing the mistake. So that is a quite comfortable position. I mean, that was different than you had in '89 in Tiananmen Square. So, of course, the question is what is the vision or the aim China wants to have for Hong Kong? Is it just everything under control and Hong Kong just being an ordinary city, or is it smart enough and seeing the chances it has with Hong Kong? I always say Hong Kong is a special political zone. I mean, the reforms in China were done with special economic zones. So you experimented, and then you took your lessons, and then the lessons spread over the whole country. And the same you could do with China, with Hong Kong. So in Hong Kong, you can experiment with elections, with real democracy, or with certain things. And if that works, you can spread it. And that is the big chance Hong Kong offers. But at the moment, you don't have the impression that Beijing wants to use this chance. But Beijing used the economic lessons from Hong Kong, but not the political.
And I would draw the attention to another aspect of Hong Kong for the Chinese government, and that is Taiwan. For the Chinese government, there is one important thing: to unite all Chinese territory. Of Taiwan still is considered to be a renegade province. And this is one of the major aims of the Chinese government, has been and still is, to bring Taiwan back into the empire. And I consider Macau was the first case. Nothing happened. Hong Kong second, and they will try to avoid that Taiwanese get shocked. Look, if we really agree to this 2 systems, 1 country, it will happen to us what will happen, or what happened to Hong Kong, if things are going to get really bad and worse. So this is another aspect Chinese government has taken or keeps in mind. Don't do anything that the Taiwanese people get really afraid. Just say, look, it's kind of a rehearsal. Yeah? Hong Kong is a rehearsal for Taiwan, seen by Chinese government.
Xi Jinping, we're slowly running out of time, but I do want to get your last assessment, your guess on how this will play out, how the scenario will play out in Hong Kong.
We just regard the Chinese leadership as a whole. We forget that within the leadership there are so many contradictions. And a part of the leadership started talking about class struggle. This was a political terminus used by the Cultural Revolution. And the other part is stressing the economic reform at the same time. And I think it depends also upon how the leadership in Beijing could unite their own line, not only because of the Hong Kong, but also because of the general political development in China. If they could do this, they could make the decision, as Swin Hansen say, they has right now a quite comfortable situation. They could hide behind the government in Hong Kong. But if they fail, if they go on with their contradictions among themselves, I think it's quite likely that this situation could remain out of the control for quite a long time.
Well, that of course remains to be seen, and whether it was caught by surprise or not, the Chinese government certainly has a big problem on their hands, as the protests in Hong Kong don't seem to fizzle out anytime soon. I want to thank my guest for a very spirited discussion. Thank you for your insights on a very important subject matter. We at DW, of course, will continue to follow this story as it unfolds. I want to thank you out there for tuning in, and looking forward to seeing you again next week for a new edition of Quadriga.